Hey, boys and girls, it's Nancy A. Shenker, also known as the Geezer Proofer, here to help you be a beezer, somebody who be relevant, be in the moment, be technologically savvy, as opposed to a geezer, which is basically somebody who is just kind of stuck. And you could be a geezer or a beezer at any age, but this podcast is targeted primarily at people over 50 who tend to get set in their ways. Not me, of course, but many of my contemporaries kind of lose their sense of purpose, or they're not sure what they're supposed to do as they get older. So I'm encouraging all of you to be beezers as opposed to geezers. And we talk about life, sex, and tech over 50, but also people who are not yet 50, but will be someday, like today's guest. And this is actually a very, very special guest, Christine Gritman, because she and I worked together at least 10 years ago. I don't have the exact date, but I keep getting pop-ups in my feed. And in fact, when I went to call you today, Christine, I still had your email address or phone number from when you worked for LoHUD. Remember
Yep.
that? So that is ages ago. And fun fact, Christine was with me when I got my first and only tattoo. I often
hmm
say it was peer pressure, but she was very compelling. So she and I go way, 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 way back. And even though we're of two different generations, we connected over our love of branding and social media. And that is a big part of what we're going to talk about today. And something that I saw immediately when we dialed into the Zoom, and those viewers who are watching on YouTube will see right away, is this pop of red, which is very much one of your brand colors, as mine are purple and lime green and silver. So brand is way, way, way more than your color combination or your logo. So that's actually a really good place to start, Christine, is to talk a little bit about what a brand really does mean to you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Nancy, for having me. And the red, it's interesting. The red really comes from who I am. It's the perfect example of taking something that happens naturally and that is me naturally already and just amping it up to 11, just making it something that's a little bit more of something to remember me by. But it's legitimate. It's funny because I look around my house, I look around my things, and I just have so much that's red. And I joke sometimes that I've almost become a caricature of myself, but it's real. And I think that you bring up a very good point, which is that red is not what my brand is. What my brand is me. Red is just one of the outer, it's some of the window dressing. Exactly. Like it's some of the window dressing, it's not the store. So what
So
personal
what three attributes would you use to describe brand Christine?
yeah. I would say it is vibe, definitely. It is human. That's got to be definitely in there. And it's real. Because if you construct a brand around yourself that is not real, you're giving yourself too much work. It's going to be a whole extra job. You're essentially casting yourself in the role of this made up marketing persona. And you don't need that. Just be you. Be you, be real, be human, and have your vibe out there. Don't hide it. Don't feel like you have to fit in with everybody and blend in. Your vibe, they say your vibe will attract your tribe, and it's true. The more human, legitimate, real stuff you can put out there, the more the right people are going to connect to it and respond to it.
Yeah, and that's funny because I was actually just having this conversation with the guy who owns the podcasting studio. And having worked at MasterCard for years on the Priceless campaign and really delving into what differentiates MasterCard from Visa, from American Express, it was great prep for me going through my own personal branding exercise. And so I would describe myself as provocative,
Mm-hmm.
which is not like taunting, but a, I make people think and I make people question their beliefs. Um, Edgy, because an edgy and or irreverent, which is kind of like two parts of the same coin. And the third one being pithy, because we were having this argument about why my last episode was only 22 minutes long. I really have always believed that why say something in an hour if you could say it in 5 minutes?
I learned
And
that as a journalist. It's about fewer, stronger words.
yeah, so I look at my analytics and most people tune out of my podcast. I mean, I'm lucky if they listen into 10 minutes or 15 minutes. If they're driving, maybe, but a lot of people aren't driving anymore. So it's so fascinating. Most people today can barely get through a TikTok. So why should I
Absolutely.
do an hour or 2 hours of me talking? I can't even stand hearing my own voice for that long.
You did mention, by the way, I didn't realize I was supposed to describe my own brand in 3 words. That's going to be different words.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
That's going to be fun, enthusiastic, and supportive. That's
Love
my
that.
brand. Fun,
Love that.
enthusiastic, supportive. I am your biggest cheerleader, but at the same time, I'll also kind of sit in the corner with you and hold your hand if you're having a moment.
That's great. Yeah. And Christine and I, and this came up in my, Facebook memories pop up. We taught a social media workshop way back in the early days of social media. And when I still have the flyer that we used to market it. It was in Yonkers, which back then had not yet been renovated and upgraded. So it was kind of a grungy area at the time. And we were way ahead of our time. So we also, if we're going to add to the list of branding attributes and things that we have in common, I think we were both a little visionary and experimental. And when you took me to that tattoo parlor, I would say I would even add subversive to the list. Although you have some fascinating tats and they all seem to have meaning to you. So what are some of your latest?
Yeah. So the one that I got when we were together, I got quote marks behind my ears. And that's because especially as a journalist at that time, I love hearing people's stories. I just really, really love that. I also I have an ampersand on my wrist, and that originally was just because I like ampersands. They're pretty. I have a bunch of them in my house, but I'm also a connector. I really am. And I've been considering adding to the ampersand by adding ellipses, so 3 dots, and of course the semicolon for suicide prevention, because I have suffered from depression. But I also have on this arm here, I've got my latest. My latest is a Tudor rose, which is a British thing because I have moved to the UK. I'm a lifelong New Yorker who now lives in the United Kingdom.
Perfect segue.
Yeah.
So, why did you move to the UK? How is it different from the US?
Mhm.
Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do tell.
So, our pat 3 reasons that we give. One of them is because we could. I have Irish citizenship, and the Irish government and the United Kingdom government have a long-standing agreement where they can live in each other's countries. I was able to get visas for my family. My husband and I have both worked remotely for a long time, so it didn't cause any problems. He still has his US job. We could. It's kind of amazing. So, number one is because we could. Number two is travel. The number of places you can get to so easily from right outside London is just staggering. It's easier for me to get to about a dozen different countries from London than it is to get from New York to Boston. So the travel opportunities, we have children, they are 10 and 12, and just we want to show them the world. And then the third reason is America's kind of going through some stuff. So we're still
That's
involved.
politically safe way of saying it.
We're
Yes,
still
this is
involved.
true.
We're still very much invested in the future of the United States. We are voting, we are active and involved, and we may move back someday, but it is kind of a good time to get a little bit of space.
Excellent. And so you and I have both seen social media change so radically from the days that you and I were working together. I mean, back then, I
Mhm.
think it was just Facebook and
People were
maybe
talking about Snapchat back then. That was the hot new kid on the block. Everyone was bugging me to get on Snapchat.
and Pinterest was in its early days.
Yep.
And there was no such thing as, what today is known as UGC, user generated
Mhm.
content. And
It was
it,
just starting.
yeah, yeah. And there were all these people who were naysayers, which was also really interesting, who said, oh, this will never catch on. This will never be a thing. And
Mhm.
now we just look at how much time the average person spends trolling TikTok, Instagram, connecting with people on Facebook. LinkedIn is
It
huge.
wasn't considered serious. It was something that the kids were doing. And it was something that didn't make a lot of sense as a serious marketing channel or a serious marketing tool. And you and I both were, as you said, visionary, but also very experimental. And I consider that as having been a really amazing time for both of us to get into social media, because it was early, and it was early enough that you could get into it just by doing it, just by interest. There weren't people graduating with degrees in social media and digital marketing the way that there are now. And so it was a really great time where if you were interested in experimenting, you could break new ground, genuinely. You could discover best practices, help create best practices. So it's a very exciting time, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. It is really fantastic to have had that opportunity to learn by doing and to develop my own expertise and my own, personal brand, quite frankly, by doing.
The other thing that, appealed to me as somebody who had worked for big consumer brands my
Mhm.
entire career, and knowing what it costs to buy advertising and to buy reach, and the process of hiring a PR agency, having the PR agency write a press release, putting it out there, or hours and hours or weeks and months developing ads, and then spending a small fortune to run the ads on TV. And I said, oh my God, there is a medium that is free. It is a
Mm-hmm.
free medium. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, now you can boost your posts or pay for advertising, but even that has gotten so sophisticated and so much
Yes.
real time. And at some point, we're not even going to have to provide direction, because AI is going to tell us what we need to do. And
It's just so, it blows my mind when I see a company that will spend advertising dollars, whether via traditional media or social media, and yet is not investing in their organic social media. There is such a ridiculous missed opportunity. And even social media advertising, I see places that are just kind of still not getting the strategy, and they're just kind of blanketing, not really, targeting their audiences, when there's so much power there, even with just the basic in-app tools. Forget about all those third-party tools that bring it to another level. There's so much you can do to target exactly who you want to see what when, to retarget people, and to really just get like crazy return on every penny. I've seen returns that have just been at like a fraction of a penny per view of a video, for example, for a client. And just the amount of eyes they got on that work, the correct eyes that would actually then buy their product. It's just incredible how direct you can make that investment, and that some people still
specific,
aren't
like,
getting.
yeah, like I
So
know
specific.
Amazon Prime Day was a prime, pun intended, a prime example of that. That if I was looking for a particular kind of product on Prime, then I would get retargeting ads for other similar products at a
Mhm.
lesser price. But what, and this is, me on my soapbox a little bit, on my anti-ageism soapbox. Something I see, which is really painful to me professionally and personally, is businesses hiring people right out of school to do their
Oh,
social media because they assume that they know what to do. And I often draw the analogy, in the older days, it would be like hiring the mailman to run your direct mail program,
yes.
because he knows how stuff gets into post office boxes. And I've had so many agencies telling me that the way to grow my business is to do more TikTok. Whereas the reality is, people are not going to hire a high level content marketer based on me dancing or even my talking head. Whereas LinkedIn is probably a much more appropriate channel for where my buyers are. So, it's not a one size fits all. The same way in the old days, different media played a different role depending on where your customers were, what they were viewing, what they were consuming. And
Also, what you feel comfortable doing. The thing is, if you, first of all, you only need to be on there's no such thing as needing to be on TikTok. Everyone tells me that I should be on TikTok because I've got the personality for it, blah, 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 but I don't want to. So I'm not going to do my best work there. I think that while it is wise to bear in mind where your audience is and isn't, it also is important to bear in mind where you will and won't hate showing up. If you popped into TikTok just to post your videos and didn't stay on to engage, not only with comments on your own videos, but also with other people's content, you know what? You're not going to get the most out of the platform. Whereas you feel comfortable going on LinkedIn, not only will you produce better content there because you don't hate showing up there and you understand the context, but also you're going to stay and engage. You're going to network. You're going to, LinkedIn algorithm in particular loves it if you are active, even on other people's stuff. And so you're just going to do a better job there because you're not where you hate. And when it comes to the 20 somethings, by the way, I want to go back to what you were talking about how they are hiring kids right out of college just because they figured they know how to do it. That's like saying because you can swing a hammer, you can be a carpenter. That's not true. There's much more to social media marketing than the tool. Social media and the platforms are the tool. These people may understand how to use the tool, but people like you and I know how to market. And it really, really matters. And I've talked to college students a lot, as have you, I'm sure. You know, I've spoken to a lot of classrooms around the country, and a lot of what they know that they don't get is really just the fundamentals of marketing. And I don't actually have formal marketing education, but I've been a person in the world and I've geeked out on it myself. And I've learned from people who have been doing it longer than I have. And you really do have to understand the fundamentals of marketing and of influence and of the social psychology that goes into all of it
And for
before you
me,
use the
yeah.
tool properly. Social media is a tool. It's not the thing itself.
And for me, you know, where I really cut my teeth, and, you know, like you, I didn't have formal marketing training. I was an English and psychology major,
Which
but
is
I,
communication.
but I spent a lot of years working in financial services, surrounded by, no offense to them, a lot of old white guys.
Mhm.
But the question was always, what is the return on the investment?
Yeah.
What are you spending? What is it generating? Which is basic business skill that you can only refine by having done it and having been held accountable for a bottom line. And that's something that I've taken with me in the 21 years that I've had my own business. And even in the past 7 years of that, where I've been focusing primarily on content writing. And I always say to my publisher, I could write the most profound, interesting, fun, pun-filled, relevant article. But if it's not getting clicks and views, then it's meaningless. It's not meaningless to me because I spent the time to do it. But if you're in business, there's only one thing that matters at the end of the day, which is return on investment. And
That's so hard with social and with content marketing. It doesn't have to, it's not impossible, but it's not as direct as maybe some people who don't get it would prefer.
today, but I really do believe that as the AI becomes more sophisticated and more precise, there will be a much clearer way to track attribution, which is the holy grail word in the business tracking world, is that, you know, yes, you could be spending thousands and thousands of dollars on PR and social media, but if the needle hasn't moved, then maybe you should be looking at other ways of spending that time and money. And our own personal time. It's like, are you spending 3 or 4 hours a day editing video and posting on your social? And what is that really doing for your business at the end of the day? Obviously, it's much easier to track if you're in a product business, but I've been able to track the impact of my social media activities on my own bottom line as a solopreneur marketing services geek, that I can track at least $1 million in new business to things that I've been doing with my email marketing and with very, very, very focused postings on social media, primarily LinkedIn. So again, coming from a world of bottom line management and attribution, it's interesting because now I do make most of my living as a journalist, but I can't get that out of my head. Is like, it's not worthwhile if nobody is reading or taking action. Am I growing my follower base? Am I growing my fan base? Am I growing my paid subscriber base?
Mhm.
Which is really, really critical over time. And we
It's
do have,
also about relevant followers, and that's so critical because there's so much information, being thrown at all of us all the time. Someone just following you doesn't really mean anything if they're not going to consistently consume your content, engage with your content, and the most important metric of all, I like to call it BOD. No, BID, butts in the door. That is the most important metric when I work with a business. I was like, BID, butts in the door. Who cares how many followers you have if they're not coming in and buying? And
I
of
say,
course, with
but
us, it's not an actual door,
I
but
would add to that. It's like butts in the door and then hands on the wallet, because
yes.
it's great if you're like, oh, thumbs up, I like these
Yeah, the
chips.
point
But
is not about followers, but at the same time, if you don't have the followers, how are those butts going to find your door?
I know
So,
I've coined the phrase quinfluencer. That's mine. You can not to be used publicly,
like
but a
that.
quinfluencer is an influencer that's more focused on quality than on eyeballs. So,
Mm,
you look at how many people advertise on the Super Bowl because it's massive reach. But if they're not then taking those customers who are aware and moving them through the sales cycle through other forms of media, then it's just a lot of navel gazing and egomaniacal, narcissistic patting yourself on the back. So
mhm.
we're about 10 minutes away from our hard stop time. I know I told you pithy is one of my attributes. I will not rush things, but we'll move it along. So for our listeners who are really just trying to either start a business, rebrand a business, go in a new direction, what are some of the, you and I both talked about attributes that we would use to describe ourselves. Having worked on MasterCard during the priceless era, we then created those lists of attributes and then said, if you plugged in Visa or American Express, would that statement still hold true? So that is my kind of cardinal rule 101, is come up with a brand descriptor that can't be knocked off tomorrow by the person sitting right next to you. You brought up the fact that it needs to be genuine, it needs to be credible. Any other advice? I mean, there are thousands of personal injury attorneys, just give an example.
Yes.
Thousands of people who are opening up coffee shops. What are some of the other things that the small business owner can do to ensure that their brand is really different from and perceived as better than the man or the woman next door or person next door?
Humanize it. If what I want is a white t-shirt, I can order that online. If what I want is ideas on, the type of white t-shirt, I'm going to trust the taste and the curation power of the local boutique owner. It's really, now that people can get literally anything they can think of delivered to their door practically instantaneously, the importance of the human is more important than ever, and post-pandemic as well. We got very comfortable just ordering things online. I know if I want something and it pops into my head, I will just order it online unless I want the experience and the curated experience of going in person to a store. Or if I want something unique, maybe I'll look online at a smaller creator. It's really about that experience and recognizing that your competition as an individual is not Amazon. If you are an accountant, your competition is not the H&R Block franchise on the corner. It's really about the human. People are buying trust with trust.
And also service. I mean, it was so interesting because, everybody knows that the Stanley water bottle became a thing. There's
Mhm.
another brand called Coldest that was on Shark Tank, and they have done such an amazing job of selling what could otherwise be a commodity product. It's a bottle that you put water in, and maybe
Mhm.
it keeps it cold longer, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I've never done a head-to-head test, but as soon as I bought a bottle, I got a really warm, welcoming thank you note. I got another note saying, if you like our product, wouldn't you like to be a brand ambassador? And we will kick back some money to you if you sell, but the way in which they did it was so warm and welcoming and kind. So it can be the language that you use around the process.
They're
Even when you're
selling
buying a
pride.
commodity. I rented a car from, I'm not going to name names, one rental company or yesterday. I normally rent from another rental company. The woman behind the counter was so unpleasant and
Mm.
dismissive that I'm thinking of going back to the other company, because the statistics prove that people are willing to pay more for a better service experience. If I have to spend 3 hours on the phone getting a problem fixed, my brand loyalty is going to start to diminish over time. Speaking
And
of time,
people talk, people ask each other for recommendations. And if someone asks you what rental company you use, guess who you're going to recommend?
exactly.
And the people who are handling branding for what I assume is a very large car rental company may not be thinking about the woman behind the counter who gave you a hard time, but they need to be. When I used to work for, my first career was in the corporate beauty industry in New York City. So these were some big corporations. We knew that the most important person in the entire company was the consumer, but we knew the second most important person in the entire company was not on the 40th floor of that skyscraper. They were at the counter in Macy's. And
Exactly.
because
And that's a
that's
really
who
good,
needs to get the brand, because they're the ones actually selling the brand.
and it's going to become even more important as AI becomes commonplace, that when you do have to deal with a human, or even if you're dealing with a bot, still want to feel like a valued customer. So thank you
Yeah.
so much. We are about out of time. So if people want to follow up with you, what is the best way to find you?
I am the only Christine Gritman there is.
Can you
Gritman is spelled Grit, like something gritty, like sand, MON like Monday. I'm at gritman.com, and my podcast is Let's Talk About Brand.
And it's Christine with a C, not with the
Yes.
K, because we've had guests with very exotic spellings. And if you would like to watch this episode up until October 9th, it'll be available on YouTube. And you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple, wherever you happen to get your podcasts. And we have about 50 other episodes that I've done so far this year. Maybe by the time you're listening, it'll be even more than that, on a variety of topics, everything from business topics like today, we just did a recording on AI, to things like erectile dysfunction and polyamory. So, as the title of the podcast implies, it's life, sex, and tech, over 50, but pretty much at any age. So, remember, boys and girls, as you go about your day to day activities, remember to be a beezer and not a geezer. And make sure that you have a brand that is customer focused, unique, and that your competitors can't match. So thanks for listening, and peace out.